Was the Rebbe opposed to a chasan and kallah taking pictures together before the wedding?
So first of all, let's talk about the practical things. And that is, what can a chasan and kallah do together before the chasana? And then maybe try and explain a little bit of it. The first concept is to realize a chasan and kallah are engaged. Now, engagement, the Rebbe actually didn't like when we used the term hisarsu in Hebrew, because erusin in Lashon Kodesh is step one of the chasana. That's what we in today's day do under the chuppah. In the olden days, they used to have first erusin. Erusin was where the chasan gave the kallah a ring and said, Hareyat mekudeshes li. She's now married to him. She's an Eishes Ish, but he didn't bring her into his home yet, which was called Nisun. She was married to him, but then they had 12 months or whatever amount of time till they made the actual chasana. And this time they prepared for the chasana. They prepared financially. They prepared with whichever way they wanted. He prepared to be ready to bring her into his house. Then they had the Nisun. Nisun was when they were ready to bring her in. That's the way it used to be back in the olden days. Legally, she was already married to him at that time. She was an Eishes Ish, she needs a get, etc. Now, for various reasons, and because of the harichos of the galus, where unfortunately things weren't able to be watched, there was so many tzaris, etc., so you couldn't just have a situation where a man marries a woman and then they're not really living together at the time, because chas v'shalom things can happen, and then there's agunas, etc., etc., etc. They were mevatel, they got rid of this concept. But there still is an idea that a man meets a woman, they decide to get married, but they need time to prepare for the marriage. And that's what we call in today's day engagement. Engagement is a promise. I will marry you. But right now, according to the Torah, you're still a regular boy and girl who aren't related in any way. However, because you now have a certain familiarity, you're familiar with each other, you know that you're going to get married to each other, there's even more reason to be more careful regarding tznius issues, even more than a regular boy and a girl, because since there is, for example, even in halacha, the Rebbe speaks about the idea, the chasan and kallah, the chasan shouldn't give the kallah a gift in her hand. The chasan should give the kallah gifts, a lot of gifts, but they shouldn't be given in the hand. The gifts shouldn't be jewelry coming from the chasan. If the chasan wants to give the kallah jewelry, it should be coming from the chasan's parents. A ring, challah shouldn't happen, etc., etc. Money is an important thing. Why? You're allowed to give money to a girl. If you go to a store and there's a girl by the counter, you can give her money. If you want to give a girl money, there's nothing wrong with giving a girl money. But because you're now, even before the engagement, because you're now on Shidduchim and you're talking about concepts of Kiddushin, even though you didn't say Hareyat Mekudeshes, it's more considered as if, because this is what you're dealing with in halacha, it's considered as if it could become problematic. And similarly over here, with all kinds of tznius ideas of separation, there has to be an extra need to show for yourselves that we're not connected in that sense, in order not to come to go over the boundaries of tznius. And one of the things that the Rebbe spoke about was that the chasan and kallah should not take pictures together before the chasana. Another of the big things is not to meet too often. Now, what has to be said with regards to this concept is, most of these things that the Rebbe said, some were different, but most of these things were not necessarily ahira klalis, a general rule. So the general rule that exists is things which are forbidden according to halacha, and one has to ask a rav or a mashpia what is allowed. The other things the Rebbe didn't usually give as much of a etched in stone rule. So regarding pictures, the Rebbe was clear about it, that the Rebbe doesn't want the chasan and kallah to take pictures together. However, that seemingly When there's other people in the picture, they just happen to be in the picture, that's not called a picture together. Nevertheless, it's something which one should be careful about. It makes a certain familiarity, taking the picture together. It's not a time to take pictures together. Happens to be a picture in the room with other people together, but it's not something which one should play around with. Regarding meeting, how often the chasan and kallah should meet. What the Rebbe was very clear about is they should meet as little as possible. That the Rebbe was clear about. For example, the Rebbe was clear about they shouldn't be in the same city. Nevertheless, the idea of, for example, meeting once a week that everybody heard about, and incidentally, that concept is that they can meet once a week and they can speak on the phone once a week, which means there's twice. So either speak on the phone twice or meet once and speak on the phone once. That was something which was not a klalis. It's not something that the Rebbe wrote it in a general letter or said it in a sikha, this is how it should be. What the Rebbe did say as a general directive is meet as little as possible. There were people who got the answer, meet once a week and talk on the phone once a week, etc. Others got different answers. There were people that the Rebbe told they should meet every day. There were those that the Rebbe said, yes, to remain in the same city. So these things are depending on the person, and every person has to speak to their mashpia regarding what's meant for them. But the general rule that the Rebbe said is do everything possible. Number one, that the chasan should be as soon after the engagement as possible. Very important. Number two is to try and do everything possible to meet as little as possible and to stay away. Sometimes it's necessary to meet, especially from the kallah side. Sometimes she really feels she needs to meet more often, and for the chasan to be religious on her expense is not necessarily the right thing. He has to ask his mashpia, his rav, what is meant to be done in this situation. Sometimes there's a reason why they need to meet. So that's why every situation has to be taken separately. But if one wants to take a general rule, generally the once a week meeting and once a week speaking on the phone generally is being an accepted thing, and that you're within the realms of what should be. More than that is something which one certainly has to speak to a mashpia. Staying away and being in a different city is something which certainly most situations, that's what the Rebbe clearly said to chasanim and kallah. So that's the general idea, and it's important to remember that one should ask their mashpia or rav with regards to this thing, because it's not necessarily etched in stone. The concept is etched in stone, but how to do it could change based on circumstances. Now regarding why, what's so bad about it? Come on, we're a chasan and kallah, we're about to get married, we have a lot to talk about, or we miss each other, we want to talk, etc., etc. Why are you making our lives a misery? There's a few points to this. Firstly, something that the Rebbe said more than once in situations where there were issues later in the marriage, such as shalom bayis issues and things like that. The Rebbe said that kiruv, in a time when there's supposed to be richuk, closeness in a time when there's supposed to be distance, creates distance in a time when there's supposed to be closeness, which refers also to even after the marriage, certain times when there's supposed to be a specific distance, but it also refers to the time before the marriage. There's a famous story that a chasan and kallah one time came on an overseas flight, on a transatlantic flight from Eretz Yisrael, I think it was, and they were together on the same airplane. And the Rebbe said he cannot be Mesader Kiddushin. As a result, the Rebbe was going to be Mesader Kiddushin, the Rebbe said he can't do it. And it was a big issue at that time, because it was family even, for the Rebbe, and it was something the Rebbe didn't want to start up with, but the Rebbe said, I can't. What am I supposed to do? I can't do it. In other words, it's something which people have to realize that there's ramifications from it. However, what's the idea and what's the point of it? First of all, what chas v'sholem, it can cause a distance at a later time, but it's even something which makes sense practically. Let's start with the first idea. Now, these ideas that make sense practically, I'm explaining it in a practical way, and there's obviously much more to it. First of all, the tznius concept, as we explained earlier, and second of all, other things which I don't know. But just to try and make it be understood a little bit better, how actually it's not trying to make the person's life a misery. On the contrary, it's for the ultimate good of the chasan and kallah. One reason is for the tznius reason, because putting gates in place is something which is for our ultimate good. Second of all, like this. Let's start with the idea, a chasan and kallah, they got engaged, they closed a certain era in their life. Why is there a time between the engagement and the chasana? There's a physical preparations that need to be, there's halachas that need to be learned, but there's also the concept of you can't just get engaged and get married right away. You got engaged now, you know now intellectually, emotionally that you're preparing yourself to get married. But the way that you have to prepare yourself to get married is there's the boy and the girl, each one has to get closure on their own lives that they lived till now. You're not ready to do this all together. Sure, there's times you want to meet and talk about your future life, but you still need your time and your space on your own, because if you don't get that proper closure on your previous life, chas v'shalom, it could affect the future. You didn't get what you needed. You can't jump straight from where you were into the new life that you had. You need now your time to have closure, but you need to do that on your own. You can't do that together with your kallah. That's one concept. Let's look at it also from a psychological point of view. The nature of things. Imagine someone wants to go to a yeshiva. Before they go to the yeshiva, they're thinking, should I go there? Should I not go there? Is it good for me? Is it not good for me? I have a bunch of questions. When I sign up, I created a certain closure. I know that I already signed up, but I still didn't go there yet. I can still back out. Once I went there, I know that this is my life is already, no matter what I see, I know that this is already part of the way things are. Take it by a chasan and kallah. A chasan and kallah, before they get engaged, there still is all the questions that are there. Once they got engaged, they have a certain closure. I promised already, we're getting married. But the fact is we're still not married. So if you're going to hang out together, you're going to see all kinds of things. It creates issues psychologically that are better avoided, because later, after marriage, these things come back to haunt you. Rather than being, once you're married, and that's also a reason to get married quicker and not to be hanging out after you're married, that's it, we're one person. When I see issues with myself, I know I have to deal with them. There's issues, we have to deal with it. But if I had the time beforehand when there was this togetherness, it creates a problem. So both of these ideas that we mentioned briefly, which are much longer and more into it, is even psychological reasons, besides the main reason of tznius, etc., why it's just unhealthy, and it's something which causes problems physically, practically, when there's too much closeness at the wrong times.